All right, so today we're going to tackle something that goes against one of our deepest instincts, that need to have an answer for everything. We're going to explore how our own cleverness, our drive to create theories, might actually be the very thing holding us back from real breakthroughs. So let's just jump right in with a big, kind of weird question. As humans, we are amazing problem solvers. It's what we do. But here's the kicker. What if that very strength, our knack for coming up with explanations for everything, has secretly become a trap? One that's limiting our potential?
I mean, just think about the human brain for a second. It's an absolute wonder, right? It's this non-stop machine of creation, churning out ideas, solving problems, even when we're asleep. It is literally built for discovery.
But there's this huge elephant in the room. This incredible, freewheeling, creative machine, well, we've kind of put it in a cage. And that cage is built out of theories. Just tons of theories, boxing us in and forcing our thoughts down these well-worn paths. So, that brings us to our first big idea, the theory trap. This is where we're going to break down how leaning on these easy explanations creates this dangerous illusion that we've already got everything figured out. Seriously, just listen to the way we talk. We talk about the age of the universe like we've got a stopwatch on it. But how solid is that knowledge really? When you pull back the curtain just a little, it all starts to feel a bit shaky, doesn't it?
Okay, so to really get this, we've got to understand the huge difference between principles and theories. On one hand, you have principles. These are the bedrock. They're tested beyond any doubt. They don't change. They're a solid foundation. But then you've got theories, and these are often just calculated generalizations. Worse, they're sometimes built on the shaky ground of other theories.
And this is how you get this incredibly wobbly tower of knowledge. See, you start with something solid, a real provable fact. Then someone comes along and builds a theory on top of it. Okay, then another person builds a new theory on top of that one. With every new layer, the whole structure just gets weaker and weaker, until you can't even see the solid ground you started on anymore. It's all just a fog of maybes. Now let's look at how this all leads to something even sneakier, the illusion of knowing. Because it turns out, over-theorizing isn't just an intellectual problem, it's a psychological one. We're literally cheating our own brains.
So here's a little quirk about how your brain works. As soon as you tell yourself a task is done, your brain just checks it off the list. It stops dedicating resources to it and moves on to the next thing. It's just trying to be efficient.
And this is the trap, right here. By slapping a theory on a problem, we're essentially telling our brain, hey, job's done, we figured it out. We give ourselves this false sense of achievement. We trick our minds into thinking we're finished when we've barely even scratched the surface.
And you can see the effects so clearly here. When we face a problem and we admit it's truly unknown, our motivation to dig in is super high. It's a mystery. We want to solve it. But the second we label it solved by theory, poof, the motivation just tanks. That deep drive to find real, hard proof, it just evaporates. So what's the antidote to all of this? Well, it's actually surprisingly simple. It comes down to embracing three little words. And that brings us to the power of I don't know, or IDK, and why it's actually the fastest way to get to the real truth. Basically, the big idea is that admitting you don't know something isn't a sign of weakness. It's a power move. It's a strategic advantage. When you act like you know it all, you shut the door to new information. But when you're willing to play the fool, you open yourself up to learning, well, everything. Think about it like this. Imagine one kid asking for directions who says, "Yeah, I mostly know how to get to the highway, just point me in the right direction." He gets a simple answer, and that's it. But then another kid walks up and says, "Hi, I am completely and totally lost." That kid gets the full explanation, the shortcuts, the landmarks to watch out for, the local tips. So who do you think actually learned more? But look, this is way easier said than done, right? We hate saying, I don't know. We're just wired to have an opinion, to have a theory. And in this age of instant information, admitting you're blank just feels unacceptable. We're terrified of looking dumb. Okay, so how do we actually fix this? What's the path forward? It really requires a huge shift in what we value as a culture, moving away from just celebrating clever ideas and instead rewarding cold, hard proof. It's pretty wild when you look at how the whole process of discovery has totally flipped on its head. Back in the day, discoveries were often just happy accidents. The results came first, and then a theory was built to explain it. But today, we often do the exact opposite. We start with a theory, and as we've seen, that can completely kill the motivation to ever find the actual proof. And that brings us to this really powerful conclusion. Imagination is amazing, don't get me wrong, it's absolutely essential, but it's the starting pistol, not the finish line. We need to shift our focus, our rewards, and our praise to the thing that actually matters, verifiable proof.
At the end of the day, it's just common sense, right? You would never, ever build a skyscraper on a foundation of maybes. So why would we build our entire systems of knowledge on top of ideas that haven't been solidified with proof?
So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. In your own life, in your work, take a hard look at the core ideas you're building on. Are they resting on the solid bedrock of proof, or are they just floating on a really, really convincing theory?